Well, hello, everyone. How are you doing today? I hope you are enjoying our Summer Stars series. We have a very special guest for you today, and I have to tell a little story on myself because this is how I found Stacey and why she's so important to what we do in our health. A few years back, I some of you may have seen this post. I did a podcast on it actually, which is I opened up my cabinet, my pantry with food pantry, and I looked in there, and all of a sudden, like it slapped me, like it was a slap upside the head. I was like, "Whoa!" It was the biggest mess I've ever seen in my life. There was no organization, and I just like and for somebody who prides herself in being a very organized person, I just went, what the heck am I thinking? I mean, how can I even cook out of this pantry? And I stopped and I ended up spending an entire day cleaning this thing within an inch of its life, like getting stuff out, decluttering it, doing all the things. And it shifted. It shifted my eating, it shifted my energy, and it shifted my weight. So, and when I say my weight, what I mean by that is to me, I think that when we release stuff, it makes it a little bit better for us. And when we have clean cabinets that we can pick food out of easily, then it makes it easy to make good, healthy choices instead of, whatever happens to be there. So I went looking for the expert on this when I wanted to do our Summer Stars series. And that's how I found Stacey Crew. So I'm going to be introducing her to you today. You're going to love her. And she has so much to share, including an amazing book. So thank you for being here. Stacey, thank you so much for being here. How are you doing today?
Kelly, I'm so happy to be here today. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited. Can you tell everybody just a little bit about who you are, what you do, and what's going on in your world?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a certified health coach and an author of Mind Body Kitchen, Transform You and Your Kitchen for a Healthier Lifestyle. And I help people make small shifts that result in big change over time. So it's really all about those small changes. I also host a radio show called Practical Mindset, and we talk about all things Mind Body Kitchen. And yeah, so I'm open to coaching people. And yeah, I'm just all about making those small changes that are going to help people, and not only with their physical appearance, but really what's happening up here. Because mindset, it really all starts in how we're thinking. So
You
that's
know, and it's funny because people will be like, oh, here we go. Kelly just found somebody that thinks just like her. But it's true, right? You have to have those small steps because big giant leaps they aren't sustainable. And
right.
it does all begin in our head. Like once we have it in our head and we can make things work, then it's like it's a complete shift, isn't it? So, yeah. So where do you want to go? I mean, can I talk about your book first?
Yeah.
Do you mind? Okay.
Please,
So
please.
I'm reading your book and I'm thinking this is really, like A, we're super aligned, and B, um, you had this analogy in there that I went, oh my gosh, how come I didn't think this up? It was brilliant. And you talked about when you get a health plan, and you're going to have to fix what I'm saying. I'm putting words in your mouth right now, but when you have a health plan, it's like a house remodel. And so tell us how that analogy works because it's a very, very strong, brilliant idea.
Thank you. And I think it's relatable too. Because so I've done a home renovation, and it was the first one. And when we started to realize, and I think this is why most people go over budget when they do a house renovation, it's because they're not looking at the entire picture. And it's hard sometimes if you're stepping into something that you aren't familiar with. So when it comes to health, for example, a lot of people will just, January 1 is a big time for people to go and join a gym, right? And
Right.
drop that, make that commitment for a year and be dropping down $1,200 for, this gym membership. Meanwhile, they haven't really thought about other things. So and I outline this in my book, but what you want to think about is not only just making those small changes, because if we all know that by the end of January, February, the gyms are pretty quiet after after that.
Yeah, right. They are.
They are. They lose, people lose their momentum, and they're they're not building up. They're starting big and then dropping down. So as far as the house renovation, I think the example I used is like you're deciding that you want to replace the flooring in your kitchen. And so you replace that flooring, but what you haven't considered is the other rooms that are adjacent to the kitchen. And then all of a sudden you're looking at the flooring and there's this disruption because it's not flowing throughout. And you can see the other spaces and you can see the divides. So relating that back to health, we want to consider everything. We want to consider mind, body, kitchen. What do we want to do for our mindset? Do we really need to maybe get the support of a coach or even a therapist, if we've got some really kind of old thinking patterns. And I love therapy. I'm all about that. But it might just be that we need someone to kind of help us sort through a few things and figure out how we can better think about our approach to our health moving forward. So there's the mind, there's the body. Does it make sense to spend a lot of money on a gym membership, or would we do better knowing ourselves? Because that's another thing too, is really being honest with ourselves. Are we going to go and do this, workout that we're walking into the gym being like resistant to begin with? So maybe it means just going out and walking a mile every day, or maybe walking a mile 3 times a week. So we've got to be really, careful and realistic about those choices when it comes to fitness. And I know that's your domain. So and then the kitchen, what are we going to do to nourish our bodies? And again, revamping our entire routine, how we do things, it's not realistic. So
Right.
what elements can we incorporate into our daily routine that are actually going to work and put us in a place where we have success, because that feels good. If we can do something and nail it and then pat ourselves on the back, that gives us more motivation than if we set ourselves up and then we don't succeed, then we're shaming ourselves, right? And we don't want to do that. So it's just those little things. Yeah.
It's basically what you're thinking is that you make the plan, you make the big renovation plan, but then you look at it and you go, okay, like if it was me, I'd be like, what's the smallest thing I can do mind wise or body wise or kitchen wise? And not necessarily like so teeny teeny that it doesn't matter, but what's something small that's manageable? And then approach the plan that way instead of like just diving in willy-nilly, which is what happens. You're right. We all know this. I mean, I've done it too. January 1st. Oh my gosh, it's resolution time. Let's do this puppy. And so yeah, it's like being more systematic
Yeah.
and more
Because
holistic, I guess.
exactly. And holistic is a perfect word because it's real. Health is more than just what we eat. It's more than just what we put into our body. And you'll find that out in my book too. I talk about chemicals in the home and how we can detox our home. That's part of being healthy. So we also need to consider our finances. Can I realistically afford another membership? Does that make sense? So it's really being mindful of all the things and then choosing where you can get the most impact for even the least amount of input. And I don't want to say, like you were saying, you don't want to do something so that it's so little that it really doesn't matter. We want to choose things that we're going to feel good about and see some results. But if we can kind of, navigate that or straddle that fence of impact and, what we're committing to, it can make a big difference.
Yeah. And it's funny when you say about the finances. Somebody yesterday told me about this new workout, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, it was the hardest thing I'd ever done." So of course, that piece of me that's like, "Oh, competitive." I'm like, "Oh, it's the hardest thing she's ever done." So I'm looking it up and I'm looking at it and I'm like, "Whoa, that's a little pricey." Like if I add that and I add the Pilates and I add the gym and holy smokes, and then all of a sudden the rational brain went, What are you even doing?
Yeah.
Stop.
Well, and those new ways, like people are always going to have, there's always going to be a new thing, right? The latest and greatest thing. And
Right.
if it's marketed well, which a lot of these are, people are going to be attracted to it. So it's, and again, this is another part of being healthy, is stepping back and saying, wait a minute, does that align with my overall goals? Do I really want to just
Right.
off and, try that out when, I've already got a set plan? So, and for a lot of people, they'll say, oh, well, I'm bored. So then maybe change it up, but it doesn't mean changing it up to the point of joining something that, costs a lot of money and is just the latest fad.
Latest fad. And probably the thing that will like, throw my joints into like absolute quandary, and that'll be that for 6 months. So yeah, you're right.
Exactly.
Sometimes you just have to stop and look. So, so I want to talk about, I mean, I've got so much that I want to talk about with you, and I know that we have a limited amount of time, but one thing that I thought about, you were talking about meal planning. And I tell people all the time, you need to plan your meals, you need to put together a list, you need to find that time and, go shopping and yada, yada, yada. But you said something that was just so smart. You said, and then take the meal plan that you've created and put it somewhere so that you see it. And I mean, to you, it probably seems like, well, duh, Kelly. But to me, I'm thinking, how many times have I planned meals and then gone out, bought everything, get home, and maybe it's Wednesday or Thursday. It's been a long day and I have to fix dinner. And I'm looking in my kitchen thinking, uh, what do I even do? So you're very good at coming up with nice, clear, concise steps for people. In fact, another thing that I found that you had done, which I thought was brilliant, was something called, you call it Go Pack, right? Tell us about Go Pack real quick, because
Yeah, sure.
everyone needs to know this. And it's Stacy's thing. So yeah.
Well, so part of the reason that I wrote Mind Body Kitchen was it was just kind of I was a professional organizer years ago, and as an organizer, there's a whole story, and I do tell the story in my book about my personal experience of decluttering. While I was decluttering, I came up with a system. It just made sense. So GoPack stands for group objects. So put like items with like items. Purge, get rid of what's no longer needed, wanted, maybe it's broken, and you're not willing to fix it, kind of thing. A is assign, so where are you going to put it? C is contain, and you'll see that C is far down the line. We don't go out and buy the containers, then organize.
Right.
But there's
Which is not what I did. I bought the
everybody
containers
does.
first.
Everybody does, because it's the fun part. But that
Right?
should be sort of, and I don't like the word should, but the C, the containerizing, is the reward for the other work. And
Oh, nice. Nice way of looking at that. I like that.
and then K is keep it up. So it's keeping up a system. Yeah, and it's really helpful. I mean, you could use the GoPack method on a junk drawer or an entire house.
Yeah, it's great. And I think that, I hope you don't mind. I think that we're linking to that as one of the downloads in the show notes. So everybody just, go to the show notes and you'll be able to find these, everything that we're talking about today. But let me bring this back on track instead of being all over the place today, and tell us about your book. Like, what do you want? Why did you write it? What what's your purpose for it, and what are people getting out of it?
Oh, great questions. Well, I wrote the book because through a personal transformation, first it was the decluttering the home, then it was, I started running. And as a runner, I needed to improve my nutrition, what I was putting into my body. And around the same time, my daughters, who were teenagers at the time, within 6 months of one another, they both became vegetarian. So I'm running, they're vegetarian. I'm like, what are we going to feed everybody? So we went through this family transformation of, what we were eating. And I was making smoothies, but I was still putting orange juice in my smoothies. I mean,
Sure.
I, I didn't know. So I learned, and through that learning, I decided to become a certified health coach because I realized that with these small shifts, we could make, get big results, and I was getting results. The running improved my mindset. For anybody who runs, I think kind of can identify with, you're running and it's like, oh, I really want to stop, but I'm going to run to the next signpost, or I'm going to, and you kind of wind up playing a little bit of a mind game sometimes.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, so that was the why I wrote the book, because I really wanted to illuminate a lot of simple ways that people could make these changes. I'm not a nutritionist, I'm a health coach, and nutritionists will get into all of the details of what we're putting into our body, the carbs, the sodium, and I do touch on that, but I simplify it to a way that you get the information, and then let's move on to solving the problems here. What are the problems? Am I feeling lack of energy, lethargic? Am I dehydrated? Because we all know we should drink more water, but I in the book put why we should, and what kind of results
Right.
we can expect from drinking more water. So it's really a guide to take the complicated information out of the picture and just get right to how you can get some results.
Yeah,
And
I like that because food and nutrition can be super confusing, actually. And really, like, I probably have 15 books in my library, and they're all nutrition based, right? And they all say something slightly different.
yeah,
So it's like, well, how about that? I guess we just pick and choose what we think is going to work for us.
yeah.
Uh,
And to
is
your
that how
point,
you approach it?
yeah, and I'm a big believer that with a lot of things, we have the knowledge, the inner wisdom. We just don't always tap into it because we're we're told as a society to look externally for answers. We're told that we don't know our own body, we don't know our own thinking, that we need all of a sudden for other people to tell us how to do things. Yes and no. We can acquire information, but we live 24/7 in our own mind and body. So it's really important. That's why meditation is so big. Because it slows us down. It gives us time to self-reflect, to feel what we're feeling, to if we're constantly busy, we're not gonna see what we need to do, and we're going to continue to look for that external um, knowledge, validation, whatever it is. So I always suggest to people, take the information and just process it for yourself. Identify what you need. We can all do better if we eliminate processed food, anything in a box. It's pretty simple. And it's going to have a solid positive effect on how we feel in our body. But it is a process to eliminate the processed food, right?
Right. It is.
It's about creating new behaviors and new habits, and that takes work. I mean, to give you an example, I'm creating a new habit for the past 3 nights because I'm a terrible scroller.
Oh,
I'll get in
right.
bed, have the phone. It's a horrible habit, and then 3 hours later I'm like, what the heck? It's 4 o'clock in the morning and I've got to get up, and so I've been creating a habit. I put the phone across the room. I listen to a meditation to fall asleep, so I just put an earbud in. It's across the room. I don't have I'm breaking the habit of just rolling over and picking up the phone.
Right.
Lights out by 11. I've slept like a baby.
Oh, great. Great.
But it's tough, and I say that because anyone listening to this conversation understands how hard it is to create new habits, and if they've tried. So but it's worth the work, because then you create one new habit and you can create another, and those habits just build on, before you know it, a year later you're in a different place.
Yeah, you really are, and it's what I like to call a cascading effect of good, right? Because by when you stop scrolling, then it's easier to fall asleep at the time you need to. Then you have better sleep. Then the next morning you wake up with better energy. Then you make better choices when you're eating. And it's just like, right? And it goes the other way too. I don't like to talk about that, but it happens too, right? So, yeah, yeah, and it's what I see is that you're just aware, right? You're
Yeah,
aware of what's going on in your world, and so you make different choices,
yeah.
and then you reap the benefits.
Yeah, a lot of what I teach to are how to eliminate distractions because there are so many distractions that keep us from really focusing on our own well-being. Um, I say this and I, realize that, people may have some judgment around it, but I'm okay with that. I stopped watching the news about 12 years ago. That was a big thing for me because all it did was raise my cortisol levels and my
Right,
stress. I
right.
was, if I want to know, I'll read something, I'll look at particular news sources, that are unbiased, that kind of thing. That's a distraction because
It is a distraction. It's a train wreck. Well, it has to be because that's the entire. I mean, okay, I refuse to go down this path that I'm getting ready to go down, but I'm just going to stick my toe on it. Like it is the job of news to be able to keep our attention so that they can, stay in business, right? I mean, that's how you stay in business. And the funny thing is I get it. I mean, I don't even know if I've ever said this before, but I quit watching news probably 30 years ago.
Wow.
And the reality is that I always know what's going on,
Yeah.
right? Like people are like, "How do you know what's going on?" I'm like, you know, I mean, I don't always know what's going on, but I have a grasp. You see, enough out there in the world to know what's going on, or if something big is going on, if there's a hurricane coming into Houston, somebody's going to tell me because they're like, she doesn't watch the weather, but I do watch the weather, or I do read the weather is a better way of saying that. But you're right in that background in being a organizer and a person who, actually taught people how to declutter, it brings all your background together into this new book. And I love your book because it really does talk about that. It makes
Yeah.
a big difference.
Yeah, distractions are such a big thing. And I mean, news is one example. I think it really, again, I'm just trying to bring people back to themselves and help them to find a level of calm and peace in their lives. And when we're used to, I mean, I was, on a chaotic deal. I mean, that's why I'm here, right? Because
Right,
I'm teaching what has worked for me, and just what has brought that peace and calm. So if we can eliminate distractions so we can stay focused on how we can improve our own health and well-being, we can be a better person in the world. And I think that's it. We can, doing all the latest and greatest things and knowing everything that's going on, that's great, but do you know what's going on with yourself? So I think
right.
it's,
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, coming back and just like bringing us back to our what I call home, which is, where I go when I meditate, and it just allows us to look at life with I guess, an easier eye, a more peaceful eye, and then we can make better choices and act instead of react. And if I'm going to tell a story really quick because this is a funny one. So I meditate most days, and about a week ago, I'm sitting there on my couch, I'm meditating, and in comes one of my dogs and puts his head across my lap, kind of against my belly. And I was like, oh, that's kind of sweet. I'm in this meditation. And then in comes the other one, and I'm like, oh, they must be tired. They have figured out, I think, when I meditate, that it must feel differently to them because now every time I sit down to meditate, they immediately are there within, I don't know, 2 minutes. And they're
oh,
like heads in my lap, all chill. Let's all do this together.
I love that. My dog, he's gone now, but he used to sit with me Um,
Really?
yeah, I think they know. They
Isn't
just
that
know.
interesting? Because my
Yeah.
old dog never did that. She was just like, ah, whatever. There she goes. But yeah, yeah, that's neat. It's neat to know that your dog did that too. So, all right. I'm full of stories today. So let me ask you a question because this is a question I have to always ask people when they use the word self-care.
Mhm.
Self-care is such a broad stroke. What does that mean to you and how do you bring it together in your book?
Yeah, that's such great questions. For me, because I do like to keep things simple, my overall philosophy, I think, in life is like undercommit, over deliver. So
Oh,
I try
nice.
do
Right.
that even with myself, so again, I can say I did well as opposed to berating myself for not living up to the high expectations. So realistic expectations. But self-care to me, I mean, there's different levels of it. It's what I'm putting into my body. It's how I'm thinking. I mean, it really is Mind Body Kitchen
I
because
was
it's
going to say it's your book, right? Like it's your book. That's what I was thinking too, because I had a friend who wrote a book called Self-Care. And
yeah.
it was so different than your book. But when I'm reading, I read hers and I'm reading yours, and I'm thinking, well, Stacey's book is self-care too, because everything you talk about is really like those things that bring us back to ourselves that it's kind of like a hug, right?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I'm a lot more protective, I think, of who and what I bring into my life these days too. I mean, I, you know, 30 years ago, of course, wasn't that way, but I think I have a lot more self-acceptance too. So part of self-care is really acceptance,
Yeah.
of where I'm at in life. I mean, it's interesting growing older because, the reflection on, like, it's very easy to say, oh, if I had only done this, if I, and I do have those days where I'm hard on myself, because I'm human and, where it's like, if I had made a left instead of a right, I'd be in a
Right.
different place. But, you know, I think that's part of why I felt so strongly about writing a book and, about my experiences, that just to help people see and illuminate like the ways that we can be more conscious about how we're living, so that when I get to 10 years from now, I can look back and say, wow, good job. Like, I was intentional. I was, really conscious about the choices I was making. So that's a big question, I think, and I think it's
Yeah.
forever changing.
Yeah.
Um,
No, it is a big question. And the other thing is that when 10 years from now, that person looks back on today, she's going to be like, thank you.
yeah,
Like, because of how you were today and, the book you wrote and the way you are and all of those other good things made her possible versus somebody who was, stressed out and cortisoled over and everything else if we don't choose those different paths.
great,
So,
great.
yeah. So tell us a couple of things. One of them, where can people get well, first, before we get to that, tell us about your radio show because I know you've got a radio show and it's fun. So a little bit about the show, please.
Yeah, sure. I love it. And it was one of those things where I was a guest and then I was invited to be a host and I just jumped in, and I love it because I get to talk with people like yourself, have conversations that, and podcasting is a big thing nowadays. And so, and really that's all about conversations. And you can just get to know about people and topics so much more deeply when it's organic. I, of course, have questions and things, and come prepared. But yeah, it's called Practical Mindset. It's live the third Monday of every month on healthylife.net. But then I download the episodes and put them on my website. So staceycrew.com/radio show. And
Okay, and
I
we'll
do,
definitely link to that in the show notes. Let me make sure. Yep.
thank you.
Okay.
I get to talk with so many interesting. Right now, it's just women. I'm thinking about adding in some men or male energy to the show as well. But most recently I had a woman on the show a woman named Bonnie Compton. She is an end of life doula. Now, I can tell you, 10, 20 years ago, that probably wouldn't have been a topic I was interested in. But given that, where I am, I love this woman too. She's amazing. She's also a parenting coach. So I've known her for a number of years, and just, to be able to talk about topics like that, or talk about Dr. Ailey Cohen. She is a rheumatologist. She was a traditional internal medicine woman, and now she's shifted her whole practice based on her mission to highlight how chemicals are in everything. So
Oh, yeah.
that was, a very interesting conversation. But yeah, check it out. I would love for people to check it out, and I plan on continuing, hopefully at some point increasing the number of episodes. But there are just so many interesting topics and people, and I love it.
Yeah, a friend of mine started a podcast recently, and she had asked me for some suggestions and things. And about a month after she started, she came back to me and she went, "Whoa, the thing I didn't really believe is what you said about you're going to really love the fact that you meet all these cool people." She's like, "I'm meeting all these cool people and introducing them to the people in my life. And it's so fun because it is this big world where we're all connected one
Mm-hmm.
way or the other, right?"
We
So,
sure are. We
yeah.
sure are.
Okay, tell everybody how they can get your book and all the good stuff about it, because
Yeah.
we will link to it in the show notes, but it's more powerful coming from you.
Oh, thank you. Well, Mind Body Kitchen, and I have a copy back here. It is available on Amazon. So of course, it's available in hardcover and paperback. And you can get information on my website too, staceycrew.com/books. But yeah, it's those are the two main places it's available. I would love for everybody to have a copy of it.
I think everybody should. It's a great book. It's a nice read, and it's provoking in a subtle way. It's
Ooh,
not like, it doesn't push you, but it makes you think. So yeah, I've really enjoyed it.
thank you.
Yeah. So before we wrap up, is there anything else that you'd like to add, or are you like, we said it all?
I think we said it all. I mean, there's always things to add. I feel like we could chat for, another however long it's been. And I just want to thank you so much for having me on today. It's been lovely getting to know you. And yeah, hopefully you can be a guest on Practical Mindset Radio.
Well, I would love that. And I know everybody listening, I'm just going to say, check out the book because it's a great book, and we'll link to it in the show notes. Thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it, Stacey.